Hey everybody, how you doing? My name is Shanth Enjeti and this is Shanth Enjeti Art, and thank you so much for checking out the stream tonight. A couple of things going on today. I'm going to cover, and hopefully my mic is working alright and hopefully the audio is working okay. I'm going to try a couple of different things with the camera and see how that goes today. But yeah, today's stream I'm going to be working on a page that I had to completely repaint the face on a character and then add another character into it. So I'm pretty excited about that and how this page is going. And let me turn this music down a little bit because I don't really feel like having it up that loud today. I don't even know if I want this music. Hang on a second here. Sorry if this seems a little haphazard here. There we go, that's a little bit better. I need my piano music because something about that other music just doesn't do it for me right now. So again, one of the things that I wanted to do is we're building up to the launch of my Indiegogo campaign, my Indiegogo comic, which is going to be called NOSFERO the Crypt Walker, and there's a link in the description for anybody who wants to go and check that out. I just realized I was supposed to do something. Sorry if I'm a little bit off today, but my brother Michael, whenever I do a stream, I always let him know that I'm streaming. So gotta let him know. There we go. Taken care of, mischief managed, as J.K. Rowling would say. So one of the things I've been doing as I get closer and closer to the launch is kind of tightening up some of these characters a little bit on the page and making sure that my next step, which is going to be cutting the trailer, I have all of the artwork that I want to have. Now, I could have just launched this book with a couple of preview images and with some examples of the artwork from the first two art books, but I really wanted to make sure that I gave, people as good of a look as I possibly could at what this book is going to be. So, today I was thinking about something that I wanted to cover today, and it's not, I don't want it to sound too formal or too planned out. I was actually not sure of how much of this stuff I'm going to talk about on my channel. But after Ethan Van Sciver's sort of debate stream about Comicsgate, and after, going on there, which was crazy, and I really think it was awesome the way that he opened up the stream to fans, so, fans and people who are supporters, backers, and occasional collaborators could kind of pop on and say hello. But when I was on there, I started thinking about, it got me thinking about something I've probably been thinking about for the last couple of years. And one of those things was kind of highlighted today with a friend of mine who works in academia still, and he called me up and to give me the news of how things go. And it was kind of amazing because I had been talking to him about this whole concept of, this really bizarre anti-free speech, anti-academic freedom, and culture of fear, presumption of guilt, and all sorts of various things that have been going on in college campuses that were kind of highlighted with Evergreen and have shown no signs of letting up. And it got me thinking about this whole thing that I think is responsible for where we are right now in a lot of those kinds of circles, and a little bit of what's been going on in the comic book industry for a while. And it's a concept that's got its ties in, neo-Marxist ideologies and all that other stuff that have completely consumed academia. And again, if you've seen me on any previous streams, I don't know if I've shown it, but my textbook for my master's program when I got my master's degree in fine arts, basically had a chapter on Marxism and how it's one of the most important ways to be viewing art history through, which may sound horrifying to you, and it's horrifying to me, but it's not a conspiracy theory when you've got it in print, and it was, again, a state school where I was learning this stuff. And it got me thinking about this whole idea of why I'm CG and why I'm interested in CG so much, and what sort of was infectious to me about it, which was I've been doing my own stuff, self-publishing, without anybody, promoting me or being a part of a movement on my own, and that's really ultimately, like any situation, that's the only person I'm really speaking for here. But what interested me about it was there seemed to be this counter philosophy that was able to happen inside of the independent comic book scene. And that was the idea, and it's going to sound sort of ridiculous to put it this way, but it was the idea of rewarding merit. And my first experience with having, the merit of my work rewarded as an artist was never in those circles, was never in the academic circles and the academic sphere. It wasn't in college as an undergrad, it wasn't in my master's program, it wasn't in any of those other places. The first time I really ever got, a chance to kind of see my work be appreciated, and it's a little embarrassing in a sense to kind of say, was when I was on Instagram. At the early days of Instagram, about 5 or 6 years ago, before Facebook bought it and it really, started messing with the algorithm as Facebook does, I kind of didn't even know what it was, and I just started uploading my artwork onto it. And it was kind of a crazy thing because there was a lot going on in my life at the time, and all of a sudden I found my work getting all of this attention, not because I was, trying to game the algorithm, which I didn't even know what it was, or any of that kind of stuff, but because I was just good at my craft, good at what I did. And it made me sort of come to this realization of why, I was almost shocked, because the world I'd been living in as an artist was so predicated on people who don't have skill dictating to people who do have skill what they are and aren't allowed to draw, what success they are and aren't allowed to have, to a degree that is alarming, but also kind of the biggest factor of it for me is how shocking it is that I got used to it and just kind of accepted it as the way things are. And one of the things that I've realized, as I've been looking at why, certain things are the way they are in the comic book industry, and also, why things are the way they are in a lot of academic circles, which are impacting the comic book industry, is because there is almost this disdain for merit. It's wrapped up in differing political ideologies in terms of why the reason people give for why they're going to attack this person or that person. But if you really look at it, and you really think, or not even let's just say you really look at it with your own eyes and make your own decision. But it's my personal belief that, or it's my belief that the reason why people have an issue with certain artists is not because of their politics or how they vote or anything. It's because they're successful, and the people who are attacking them subconsciously know that they're nowhere near as skilled and nowhere near as creative as these other artists are. And that's a lot more of a bitter pill for some people to swallow. So when I was reading comic books, one of the things that people don't, one of the things that I think is hard to convey to people is that when an industry is healthy, it's not, it's because people with skill and people with, actual ability to draw, paint, storytell, are able to get into the field. And contrary to what a lot of people might think, and certainly contrary to what the, victim, victimizer, grievance culture, Marxist malarkey would have you think, it's better for everybody when successful people can get into a field. I know it's crazy, but they sell tickets to the party. People want to be a part of it. And what's kind of interesting is the way that a culture and a cult of resentment, like the one that you're seeing kind of take over culture right now, they destroy and chase out all of the quality people who actually work hard and know how to do a job, that soon all you're left with are a bunch of resentful people. They either drive out or try to destroy the lives and careers of people who are successful. And I've seen that happen in education. The amount of teachers I know who have left in frustration, and I've seen that happen in film, in the arts, in entertainment, and it's kind of unfortunate because it's on your front page every single day, and the only thing I can figure is there is some one on the part of the people who are the sharp end of the sphere. The sharp end of the sphere. That should be the name of my autobiography. The sharp end of the sphere. But there's on the sharp end of the spear, you've got people who are really just agitators and stalkers that go after people, and who are quite unhealthy, and deeply troubled and disturbed. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are actually playing the game for the, who actually have a reason to their game. And the people who are the sharp end of the spear think that they know what that reason is, that they're all in it together. But what's really going on is that they're acting as pawns. And they're pawns because people with skill are expensive. And they cost money. And if you can drive them out, it's cheaper. So you take their ability, you take their work, you make lots of money off of it, and then when they start to get expensive and they start to get needy, it's easier and easier to look the other way or actually actively encourage the destruction of their careers and their lives. And it can be something as simple as driving them out by frustrating them out, by passing them over for rewards and passing them over for opportunity. But at its core, this idea or this, concept that I've been thinking about a lot lately of anti-merit seems to be at its core. That's what it is. It's very strange, and it's a lot of places. And I've been wondering a lot about that. Like, what is it about a person to where when they see another person being successful, or they think another person might be successful, that makes them feel like that it's a threat to them or that they can't tolerate it? I don't know what that is. I mean, I know it's incredibly unhealthy, but I really gotta tell you, when I see someone else being successful, I feel, maybe I'm an idiot, but I feel really good for them. I feel really happy for them. When I see somebody overcome, a bunch of people coming after them, let's say, in the case of someone like Ethan, I root for that person. I think that's great. This is an important thing to celebrate. And it's really kind of interesting because I've learned, the sort of the hard way that you really gotta be cautious about certain things. And I don't mean suspicious. I think you can take some things at face value, but I don't know. I don't know if I would ask anybody to at this point. I think that it's a shame because I think that our world depends on, or being in a healthy situation requires a certain amount of trust and a certain amount of, being positive and getting to know people and trusting your experiences that you have with people. I mean, you can't be living your life thinking everyone's going to betray you at some point or whatever else. But I do think there are certain qualities of people who resent other people's success that you can kind of learn to spot. And it doesn't take much. All you have to do is see if they're capable of acknowledging your success. That's it. And the successes of others. And that's everything you need to see. That's everything you need to know. And so you see this in so many places, but I think one of the places where I was kind of fascinated by it was when I was watching the way that the mob sort of was going after J.K. Rowling. I've also watched the way the mob went after George Lucas. I think they were pretty effective. They were able to get George Lucas to separate himself from Star Wars, and now a corporate entity has complete control over that property in no small part because of the way that fans were encouraged to rabidly treat George Lucas. And I think it's important that people who weren't around for it go back and take a look at how the mainstream media really put a lot of garbage into their reaction to Jar Jar Binks and fueled that. What a lot of people think of as being like, oh, that was a natural and organic sort of thing. It actually was not. And if it was, and if the interest was sincere, then I don't know how nearly driving Ahmed Best to jump off of a bridge was, the actor who played the character was doing anything positive for their stated goals. And so I watch this stuff a lot of times, and I think that the thing that got me in the case of Ethan and his work is I think that they were trying to drive him off of and drive him out of DC Comics because of his contributions to Green Lantern. There's the politics, and I mean, it's not for me to speak about. I'm speaking about it because I have a YouTube channel, and it's something that fascinates me. But I had no idea until he went independent, until he left mainstream comics, just how much he had contributed to the Green Lantern mythos. Not a clue. And I wouldn't have known anything about Ethan because I hadn't collected or been interested in mainstream comics since, I was buying, let's just say this, I was buying more trade paperbacks than I was anything else. But I wouldn't have known anything about him if he hadn't have been ranting about The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens and Star Wars. And it's the same way that I met my friend Michael. And because I was like, have I lost my mind? What's going on in this world? And so for me, as I watch this stuff, I am left wondering, how is it that so many people cannot see how really, not going to just say dangerous because it is dangerous, but what a despicable and hellish culture it is to live in, where you have got this cult of anti-merit, a resentful mob of unskilled people driving some of your most skilled, most talented people, and that can be whether or not they're artists, illustrators, comic book artists, or even teachers. Because people who do the work and show up every single day are your most valuable commodity. And sometimes it's it's unfortunate how bureaucratic systems, and it could be editorial or it can be committees, can drive out and be used as, power systems, which is funny because they're usually coming from the people who decry power and think of it as such an evil concept, but they're the people who are most in love with it. Excuse me. But how they can use that stuff to drive people out in the name of, trying to do quote-unquote good. I'm very suspicious when people tell me they're trying to do good, I have to be honest. It's interesting. It's definitely been, that concept has been on my mind because as someone who has, funny enough, let me follow it with this winner of a transition. As someone who's spent a lot of their life trying to do good for other people and trying to do things as a teacher, what I found is you don't really get recognized by it, by any kind of, or recognized for it in any kind of institutional way. And that's fine. That's not something that I think a person should necessarily, expect on some levels. Although, I don't know, I've been reading some stuff lately that's been making me kind of question my whole approach to life and approach to that. But I think you should take credit and make sure people are giving you these days, I don't know, guys. I don't know what to tell you. I'm at a crossroads, is the best way I could put it. When I was younger and I was a young idealistic teacher and I was, not long ago, painting classrooms and doing all of this kind of stuff, I just thought, at the very least, it would be appreciated, and that it wouldn't be, wouldn't be something that, let's think of the best way to put that. I thought it was something that people would appreciate the work that I put into it and have enough regard for me and enough respect for me to ask for my insights or my thoughts, and certainly to think that maybe I should be involved in any kind of decisions for how my labor and work was distributed. And when I realized that didn't happen, I started doing some serious soul searching and thinking. And this is around the same time that, I was watching all of this kind of insanity come in this insane curriculum, CRT and all that nonsense come into academia, and a lot of former free speech advocates and people who talked about the importance of an artwork's right to offend 5 minutes or 5 years earlier were now kind of becoming aspiring thought police, authoritarians, and talking about things like decolonizing bookshelves, which is to say getting rid of books that they don't like the ideas of, which I find just absolutely despicable and authoritarian. And what kind of struck me as interesting about that was that I sort of realized, like, oh, these people will just sort of say whatever they need to say depending on the direction of the wind and where it's blowing. Gonna walk away from that joke. But for me, as I look at that kind of stuff and I look at art and culture and how all this stuff works, I started reading some books, and I started reading my wife told me about this short story that one of the English teachers at her school was having people read. And it was a short story called Anthem by Ayn Rand. Now, you either don't know who Ayn Rand is, or, very likely you've been told to fear Ayn Rand, because that's generally speaking, how I came to it. And what was kind of interesting to me is I've got this attitude. I hadn't read a lot of books, but I have this newfound attitude that whenever certain people are telling me not to read a book, I'm going to go read that book. So it's some of the best PR in the world is telling me what I should or shouldn't read. So thank you for that. To all the people who were talking about, don't read this book. So anyway, I read this short story, and I was blown away by how it articulated so perfectly this idea of anti-merit, and this idea of people having no respect for merit, people basically trying to teach people to be ashamed or feel bad for actually working hard and being skilled, which sounds crazy, I know, but it is an actual thing. In fact, it's what, Marxism, communism, the Khmer Rouge, and all of those great communist holocausts of the last century are predicated on, which is resentment for other human beings. And so it's kind of strange because someone said to me, a person I know who is, essentially falls in line on the opposite end of the ideological spectrum, pro-control, pro-censorship, pro-everything, and probably pro, without knowing it or not anyway, pro-Marxist. And a lot of people don't even know where these ideas come from, but it was interesting to me because this particular, person was kind of like, this short story strikes me as something that's the opposite of everything that you've ever spoke about. And I thought, whoa, have I... And I said, it was really funny, I said, it's sort of, I hope I've always sort of said I'm against things like, the Khmer Rouge and all that kind of stuff. And I said, what are you talking about? This strikes me as not being, anything to do with the story. And they said, I said, have you read the story? And they were like, no. And I thought, what the hell do you have a problem with if you haven't even read the story? And that's kind of the thing that fascinates me the most is just the lack of curiosity of how these things happen and how little people actually know about the things that they're kind of spouting. And so for me, and I might be a prime example of that for all I know, or it's pretty certain on some levels, but as I'm looking at this stuff, like what I'm doing right here while I'm talking, yo, what's up, boss? I tell you what, Michael, you let me know in the chat, but if you want, I can send you a link and you can pop into the stream. We'll see how that goes. I don't know if it's gonna work. You'll be on screen though, and I won't be because I don't have my camera working. But let me know if you ever want to pop into the stream and be on camera, or maybe just be your icon and talk, because we can do that sometime. But it's good to see you, boss. Good to see you. So yeah, I mean, when I'm working on something like this, it takes so much practice, so much, time, effort to get to this point that I'm at right now. And I'll only be able to do this for, this or hopefully a little bit better for a bit, or better, for as long as I'm alive after this. It's a very fleeting time that you have as an artist, once you gain all this mastery of how to do it, or this competency. And it's a very interesting thing. And I sort of think to myself sometimes, like, it's a weird thing to get to this point as an artist and have to pretend like you're not at this point. Yeah, this design is actually in book 2, Michael. It's let me see if I can make this happen here. Let me see. Star this, and then I'm gonna see if I can make this happen. Isn't there a way I can? Let me see here. Add to broadcast. There you go. I've been wanting to do that every single time that I see a comment from somebody. So there you go. So yeah, this design is in art book 2 in the Undead Medley. And when I did it, I had always planned on using it as a character for this kind of story. And once I figured out and redesigned this character's face, I had it right in the sketch, but then I had to rework it. I really wanted to put this character in as kind of like the mastermind, or I should say the mastermind behind everything that's going on. So if you know anything about the H.P. Lovecraft mythos, and if you don't, it's absolutely worth checking out. There's this tie to the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon, which is one of those H.P. Lovecraft creations that's in Evil Dead, and used everywhere. There's this character called the Mad Arab Abdul Al-Hazared that H.P. Lovecraft used to call himself when he was a kid, and what it basically is it's Abdul all has read, like he's read all the books, because Lovecraft was a nerd. Oh, there you go. Excellent. And so I didn't really like reading fiction until I read this H.P. Lovecraft story called The Thing on the Doorstep. And it was a total horrifying page-turner. And it's funny, I've gone back and read it since and seen how it ties into some of the other books. But H.P. Lovecraft's visions of horror and visions of celestial worlds that Del Toro kind of articulated so well in the Hellboy, movies, and that, Mike Mignola used in Hellboy as well. They're incredible, but one of the stories that really got me, because, H.P. Lovecraft, I hate dwelling on it because it's such an obvious thing, and it's such an intellectual, like, it's something intellectuals point out that is so utterly obvious and so, that it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, did you know? But H.P. Lovecraft was a barking mad racist. And but what's interesting to me about H.P. Lovecraft is I'm just saying I don't think Lovecraft and I would have gotten along, or I'm not saying that, but I'm saying I don't think H.P. Lovecraft would have liked me, and I probably would have felt quite uncomfortable around him. But the thing that's interesting to me about H.P. Lovecraft that I didn't know and that I would hate for this to get in between anybody in reading his work, is he wrote, I didn't understand what racism, or what people who had this particular type of really vehement sort of terror racism that he had, what it was like for them, until I read a book where he clearly articulates in metaphor that fear. And it's a book or a short story or a novel, I'm not sure what it is because I always get it in collections, called The Shadow over Innsmouth. And when I read that and I got to the last bit of it, the twist at the end of it, yeah. Well, you know what I was saying to my wife is we were up at the Guillermo del Toro exhibit up in Toronto, and Guillermo del Toro has an Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft life-size silicone, utterly realistic statue of both of those guys, and he had it at the exhibit. And so I paused in front of it just for fun, tongue-in-cheek, and I gave my wife a big kiss so that good old HP could see his worst nightmare unfolding. But it's kind of funny because he really, he's influenced Neil Gaiman, Stephen King, all of these authors. And the sad sort of part about it is for him anyway, is he was such a clearly tortured soul, and he had a really horrendous experience. And so he died at I think he died in his early 40s, of some kind of intestinal or stomach cancer or something. I mean, he was a very depressive and miserable kind of person, been one of those really conflicted people, with just, who also had this, unbelievable genius to him. And it's really funny to me that a Mexican, I believe American, but immigrant, Guillermo del Toro, introduced me to H.P. Lovecraft. The irony is amazing. It's pretty thick irony with that. And that's how I actually got interested in H.P. Lovecraft, because I love Guillermo del Toro's artwork and his films so much that I was like, he kept bringing this guy up. And so I was like, oh, I have to check this out. And there you go. So let's do this. I'm going to go in and see if I can zoom on this just a little bit more. And we'll see how that does. That is able to focus it on. There we go, a little bit. So this right here is where I'm doing a lot of the detail work right now on this character's face. Now, the thing about this is this is a nod to, yes, yeah, I love Pacific Rim. Love Pacific Rim. So Pacific Rim, and Michael knows my son very well because my son's a big fan of Starship Valiant. Is that it's good to see you, Edmund. Is that movie was sort of like my son Aiden and my movie. We watched that together. I got him one of the giant NECA Gypsy Dangers, and he would hold it in his lap while we watched that movie. So that is one of my... I have many fond memories of time that I spent with my son when he was little, and he's grown up to be quite the cool dude. And those are some of my favorite memories are watching that, because it's just such a great movie to watch with a kid, and we watched it when he was younger, and there were parts where I was like going, I don't know if you can watch this part yet. It's just so funny to think about now. But lots of happy memories of that movie. And it's weird because that's a Lovecraft kind of kaiju film, which is interesting. If there's one thing I think would have been really cool, to be honest, when I saw that, is if with the kaiju he had played up the Lovecraft thing even more. In a lot of ways I think it could be cool if, they really, rather than kind of an extraterrestrial sort of thing, if it was like a much more of a spiritual kind of demon type thing. I would have really loved to have seen that, I think that could have been really cool. So I'm going to try something real quick. I'm going to move this. Going to move this over to here, and I want to check on something to see if I can pull something off. So stay with me. You'll probably hear me a little bit, but apologies if I fade out. No, that's still not working. I wonder how long this thing has to charge for before it works. Well, I was trying to get a second camera going today, but this camera is so completely dead that I'm working on it. It's not really doing it for me. But yeah, I wanted to do, when I'm working on this book, one of the things I really wanted to do was kind of play up a Sorry to move us there for a little bit. But I wanted to have both a H.P. Lovecraft thing, a Universal Monsters thing, and a just a adventure story. So when you take a look at a piece like this, where you've got this kind of spiritual mummy character and this Cthulhu bat creature sitting on a gigantic serpent throne, it's got almost every kind of horror visual in it. But the thing that I wanted to do with this story that I feel has been kind of lost lately, and this is a thank you and a shout out to, again, the choice voice in the chat for introducing me to Hammer Horror, is how the Hammer Horror films, and particularly the genius of Peter Cushing, really kind of brought and kept some of those ideas of the power of the cross with, in those vampire stories, and the nobility of Cushing's character in those stories. I just fell in love with it. And earlier today I was watching, and it's an interesting film, but the Francis Ford Coppola Bram Stoker's Dracula, with the great costume designs by Eiko Ishioka. And the thing about that really kind of got me was how it's a very cynical view on a lot of the vampire tropes. And I thought to myself, it's like it's I didn't realize how kind of, and it's artful and it's really interesting, but how cynical of an attitude it took between blurring the lines of sort of good and evil. It's like every every one of those stories is or from that time period is that this vampire is just misunderstood, and I get it. Like I get that whole idea, but I think Werner Herzog's Nosferatu the Vampire did a much better job of giving nuance without confusing the essential theme of why the vampire is what it is. I mean, it's not a misunderstood hero character. It's an interesting theme, but I'm kind of think we've kind of maxed out at this point, treating villains as misunderstood for non-narrative versions, but just to kind of tip things on their head. I think George Lucas kind of did some really interesting stuff with Darth Vader and that character, but I don't know if I need to see Cruella de Vil as a misunderstood merchant of dog coats. It's just not my bag. Yeah, it's amazing and haunting and a worthy companion to the original, which is also a work of brilliance. And of course, what's interesting to me is that Werner Herzog's film, predates Coppola's film, which is, again, I wouldn't own it if I didn't think there wasn't some really cool stuff in it. But it's one of those things to where, let's see if I can alter or move that camera just a little bit, just that. There we go. It's one of those things to where I've been thinking a lot about Halloween as the season is upon us, and I'm about to start decorating for Halloween because I cannot wait. And I've been thinking about just the power of treating things as they are. Treating things as, I guess one of the movies that really affected me that I saw, even though it's got nothing to do with the tone or ideas of my story, but it was interesting food for thought, was the movie The Witch, in which it dealt with the idea of, the witch and did it seriously. It took it somewhat seriously. To me, the idea of, studying vampire lore and looking at the power of the cross and the power of Christianity and those themes is a part of that vampire lore, much like with a lot of the Gothic sort of lore, really appeals to me because it's been something that's been kind of removed from it for so long and seen as old-fashioned. I think it's kind of one of those things that actually is where a lot of the power of these stories comes from. So we'll see, we'll see how it works in this story. But, to me, I mean, as someone who loves the Blade movies and loves the whole, what is it, crosses in holy water, doesn't do anything kind of approach to vampires we've been living in for a good while, I think it's time for a return to the kind of classical vampire. So we'll see. And for any of you guys who've bought my previous art books, I know both of you guys have got them. Yes! Yes, Michael, you're absolutely right. The simplicity of the Hammer films, good is good, bad is bad. I'm so I'm getting to the point to where it's we've just deconstructed things to the points to where it's kind of like I think we don't need to. I think it's just about the idea of saying, well, what if it isn't? Which I get. That's a really interesting thing, but where do you go with that? And it started with Alan Moore and The Watchmen, which is, what if these superheroes... Denny O'Neil talked about it really brilliantly, which he said, he goes, I understood what they were trying to do, or what they were thinking in doing their stories, and if you can get good stories out of it, great. But he goes, but where do you go with that? Like, so once you take these heroes and reveal them to have feet of clay, and that they're just like you or I, awesome, they're just like you or I, now where do you go? And I think what you end up having is these very banal sort of stories. And I don't know if I need vampires to be raving at a club. It's cool as long as Wesley Snipes comes in and chops them to pieces. But I don't know if that's more important to me than the invention from Nosferatu that wasn't in Bram Stoker's original book, which is, the sunlight killing of a vampire. That's a really cool theme. That's something that is used in Blade and other movies. But then I think, how cool would it be if vampires recoiled in horror from the cross like they used to? And what does it mean to us that, we've slowly, divorced ourselves spiritually from, what the origins of, the main religion of the West, and that we've kind of, no pun intended, defanged our spirituality and kind of turned it in our artwork and in our culture into a joke. I don't know, to paraphrase Denny O'Neil, I don't know what you get out of that. I mean, we're here now, so all right, but I think it's a lot more of a challenge to try to do something with that than it is to just keep tearing things down. And for anybody who has not seen, and thank you again, Michael, for this, but anyone who has not seen The Brides of Dracula and Peter Cushing's stunning portrayal of Van Helsing in that, check it out and you will absolutely, hopefully, get what I mean. If you don't, you won't have wasted your time, I promise. But Michael really got me to take a hard look at Peter Cushing as a result of his praise of his acting ability, of his character, and everything. And I can't thank him enough, because Peter Cushing in that movie is like, he's not a skeptic, and he's not... It's so hard to describe his character in any terms. He believes in evil, and he is good. And he risks himself and sort of lays it on the line because of those beliefs. And that's what I want to tell stories about. That's what this comic book is about. This comic book is about, there is a clear good and there's a clear evil, but if anybody who hears that and thinks, oh, well, then it sounds like it's going to be simple, there is absolutely nothing simple about clear good and clear evil. If there was, and when I say that, I don't mean perfect and imperfect people, because you can have flawed characters, but watch Peter Cushing's portrayal of Van Helsing. That's all you need to do to see how complex, fascinating, and rich good can be, and how, funny enough, complicated and heartbreaking evil can be too, and how confusing it can be for us as an audience to see characters where you kind of sort of understand some of their motivations, but you also just go, no, that's a bridge too far. And it's interesting too, because one of the things I was talking about earlier in the stream was just the kind of intellectualizing of film and story beyond, and when I say that, I don't mean intellectualizing it in terms of psychology, which even still I don't think is necessarily the perfect way to create stuff, but it's definitely a useful, it can be an interesting way, let's say, to examine things. But certainly the whole socio-political aspect of things, which I think makes for really tedious and uninteresting experiences with your work. And I was watching I was reading descriptions of how people were framing Texas Chainsaw Massacre when it came out. How's that for a segue? And the thing that kind of got me about it was how many of them were like, and it's a movie that many critics at the time, and of course they did, were like saying it was a indictment of capitalism. And I'm like, when are critics and people not pushing Marxist horse crap down our throats? It's not. I'm like, only someone trying desperately could watch that movie and try to bring it around to Marxism. But then again, my art history book shows that that's been kind of the goal forever, or anti-capitalist message. I found that really fascinating because I watch it and I get a completely anything is open to interpretation, or I should say, as J.R. Tolkien said really well, there's a difference between an allegory and an application. When a critic or even an academic like myself approaches a work with a particular frame in mind, you get a confirmation bias. You get a framing bias. It just is. It is what it is. And it doesn't mean that there's no validity in the approach, but the more ideological it gets, the more of a religion it becomes, or I should say, let's not say religion because that should call it what it is. The more of a dogmatic ideology it is, the less merit I'm going to put in things. And it seems like there was only one trick in the 70s and 60s, which was capitalism is evil in a particular cross-section of people, even though there was plenty of evidence to suggest the other communism was horrifying. And I don't think that movie has anything to do with it, Oh, nice. Yeah, it's if you want to do a stream and talk about that movie, hit me up. I'm not even kidding. I would love to do it. And I'm going to stop out of respect to you and your watching experience. I'm going to stop talking about it. I'm sure you know plenty about it anyway. How could anybody not? But I don't want it to, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to take away from your own experience with the flick by talking about what I walked away from it with. There's so many interesting ways to look at that film. And I've been looking at a lot of early 70s work and the transition into the late 70s into the 80s work, and the transformation both spiritually and culturally that we underwent of coming out of a period of kind of cynicism and hopelessness, and to a period of really some amazing artistic pop cultural works. And some of them, by the way, took a more bleak view, which is Texas Chainsaw Massacre or certain aspects of Jaws, or things like that. But I just think it's such a worthy watch. Part of the month of horror, yes. Oh gosh, Michael, I'm so excited. Anybody in this chat who does not subscribe to The Choice Voice, go and do it right now. You will not regret it. The month of horror is coming up. I look forward to it every single year. I look forward to the month of horror. And even when a couple of days are missed, they're always, made up for the following month. And if it was up to me, the month of horror would last all year long. That's my pitch for the month of horror. So let me see here. What films? Hang on one quick second here. I'm adding that to the broadcast so that people know to check that out. So what films would you say have been the biggest influences on your artwork? Well, there's the ones that have helped me, as I always say, survive, and there's the ones that have kind of influenced what I do. So I would say, I throw a bunch of different things in there. Michael Jackson's Thriller was a huge influence on my horror artwork, without a doubt. That music video and Michael Jackson himself pretty much hit me like a ton of bricks. And that was the first time I was really exposed to Rick Baker's work, even though American Werewolf had already come out. I hadn't seen it. Star Wars, of course, huge influence on me. Let's see what else. Oh, biggest influence on the artwork you're looking at, and every time I watch this movie, I am giddy about it, and it's so strange, but it's a movie that hit me as a young teenager, and it hit me at the perfect time, and that's Batman 1989. Anton Furst's design, the Batmobile, the Batsuit, the art direction of that movie, that is probably, when I think about how I would like my comic books to feel, it is definitely, something like Batman 1989 crossed with the theme park attraction of Disney's Haunted Mansion. Those are the two things I think of that are the most in terms of how they speak to me. And if someone were to say what movie is the best movie to watch, if someone wanted to understand my spiritual center as an artist, I would say it would be the movie E.T., because Steven Spielberg, like so many people in my generation, is just one of my heroes. But E.T. Is one of the to me the greatest movies ever made, and I know a lot of people would say that, but I think it really is a spectacularly special film. So yeah, E.T. If I was going to be put on an island and I could only take one movie with me, it would be E.T. Even if I didn't watch it every single day. It's not like a movie I watch every single day, but it's a movie that I need to know exists because it's such a majestic work of art. It's probably one of the better cases I can make for a movie. But yeah, I know that everybody, they always say that people, always imagine the era they were growing up as better. But I think that's a little bit of a cop out. I think the 80s and the works of Spielberg, Lucas, there's a reason we're still talking about them, and it was a great time to be watching movies and watching the art form. Just like I would say that the early 2000s and late 90s were one of the greatest times to be reading fiction as a young reader. You were reading, the Harry Potter books. Then there was the sort of, funny enough, the resurgence because of that in the movies. The Lord of the Rings books. Then there was, there was Twilight. There was the Hunger Games. There were all these huge books that were coming out at that time that affected young readers, and they were all a part of it. And I think in a lot of ways they're like the Spielberg, kind of era of films where you got Star Wars, but you also got movies like Goonies and Back to the Future. And not every single one of those movies, they're classics, but they don't all have to be high art. They're kind of, maybe they are high art in a certain way in how they speak to the time, but they're just fantastic popcorn films. And there was this period of like page-turning books and reading, just like I think in the let me just say this, probably the mid to late 80s, there was a massive new renaissance in the comic book art form. So yeah, there's just certain time periods where there's lightning in a bottle, and the 80s was mine, but yeah, Batman 1989, I've got the NECA Batman 1989 figure right now as a part of this process for me, is pretty much in the center. There's a you'll appreciate this, Michael. There's a little bit of a trinity right there, okay? There's Batman 1989 on one side. There's Ash from Evil Dead 2 up there. And then in the middle, there's Wesley Snipes from Blade. Those are my three figures I've got front and center as I work on this project. So 3 characters I absolutely love. Just great characters. And, the interesting thing about this is, and you can see whenever you see me, doing brush work, that it's pretty quick. I'm pretty, at this point in my artistic career anyway, I'm pretty adept with a brush. And I can kind of put down a mark really, really well. And I'm pretty fast on it. I've probably noodled with this page a little bit more than I typically would. But it's because the things I'm doing on it are character design based, and it's just, oh, thanks, Michael. I know you and I would we could totally do a film festival. I think we would come up with a pretty cool one because we have similar tastes, but there's a lot of interesting things that we don't overlap on. Like, for example, you introduced me to Hammer, but also what was the movie? There was a movie. Oh yeah, your B movie recommendations. I hadn't even heard of some of those films, and they were just really interesting and quirky flicks. But yeah, I love those films. You know, I did a reference. There's an artist named Aaron Lopresti who appears on Ethan Van Sciver's YouTube channel, Comic Artist Pro Secrets, and I did an intro, or not even an intro, just a fun video. It wasn't really an intro at all, which I made sure I told Ethan, I go, this is not an intro, it's just something that made me laugh, where I dubbed out Aaron with Marlon Brando from Apocalypse Now, and it was just really funny, to me anyway. It just made me laugh. Fortunately, a few other people thought it was funny, but it was just weird. It's like many of the things I do. And, but it was really kind of fun to do because those movies are so iconic. And there's some really great performances, and there's some really great lines during that time. And I guess it was late 70s, early 80s. What a great time. I mean, maybe you could start it sooner with movies like Planet of the Apes and not Close Encounters, and 2001. But it was just it's hard to think of anything that's comparable to some of those movies. I still haven't watched the original Planet of the Apes with my kids, which I really want to do soon. I think we might do that during October because I think that's a good film, for October. Just a really great makeup work, great creature work, and a really nice creepy ending. Very Twilight Zone. And of course, Twilight Zone, one of my all-time favorite things to look at. So here you go. This is where we're at right now. Slowly but surely starting to get this thing where it needs to get to. And yes, yeah. It's, you got to understand, like, I mean, maybe I just wasn't in the right, right rooms where people were watching all these movies and knew about all these movies, but I didn't actually know anything about that movie, or I certainly didn't get it. God, it must be just slow on the uptake, because I had seen, before I saw Planet of the Apes, I had seen Spaceballs. So the fact that I didn't understand, and I'd seen the poster of it, the fact I didn't understand what was coming or what the context of it was, like I thought it was just an artistic poster or some kind of artistic statement. I didn't think for some reason what the hell was going to happen in that movie. And man, boy, that's a good one. You'll have to look that up for me. It's out of reach, so I can't, and I'm not going to use Google for it. But I remember seeing that movie and getting to the end and going, "Oh, that's why that's such a famous sequence." I know it sounds kind of idiotic, but the sequence where, and spoiler alert, the movie came out, in the late 60s, so everybody should have seen it by now. But it's the sequence with the lobotomy and the taxidermy were utterly terrifying. Like, when I saw that, I just gasped. I had never seen anything that bleak done in a movie before. And I'd seen things, but I don't know why. Somehow in that context, I guess I naively thought that, oh, this is an old movie, so it's not going to be too tough, which is funny considering movies are probably a little bit tougher in that era than they were in the era I was coming up in. But that really scared the heck out of me, or it really affected me. I would say it scared me because I was older, but it really affected me. What a brutal sense of isolation you start to get as you realize one by one everybody that he knows is gone. Just creepy. And then the end is just such a kick in the gut. There we go. Now, that is one of my favorite things in the world to do when I'm doing this work, is putting in these little highlights. I'll paint, and I'll layer, and I'll layer, and I'll layer, and then I finally get to a point where I get to put a highlight in an eye, or get like a little bit of a glow to something, and then I'm just over the moon. It's such a fun part of this for me. And when this book launches, it's I can't tell you how excited I am and how proud I am just to, be able to do this, and how proud I am of the work that's going to be in the book. And again, if you haven't signed up for the email list yet, if you sign up for the email list and you back the book, you get a free 4x6 head sketch. So if you do both of those things, it's worth signing up for, because I think it really means a lot to Indiegogo's algorithm if people back the book in the first 24 hours. If it moves quickly in the first 24 hours towards its funding goal, it gets kicked forward in the algorithm. So it's so important to get people signed up for it, to know when it launches, and to really get a big push in that first day. So we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of great campaigns out there. Yeah, oh yeah, it's pretty rough. Yeah, I didn't see that as a kid, and I can only imagine. I saw it as an adult. It scared me. So it's like, what in the world? But I've seen some. There were some moments, I have to say, in some of the Hammer horror films that were pretty affecting. Just the. I don't know if you'd call them jump scares. They're almost like drama scares, but they're really pretty creepy. But I think what was interesting to me the most about Hammer is how moving a lot of the sequences are. There's a lot of romance in Hammer films that I rather like. And I think that's ultimately what's exciting to me about doing this book, is having a little bit of the romance in it. Beautiful female figures, beautiful male figures in that sense too, beautiful creatures and things like that. That's what Hammer horror did so well. There was just a grandeur to it, and this is pulp. It's the opposite of PC, and which is not, which is where I think art goes to die. I remember someone was talking rather passionately about the idea that, again, for people who are, culturally or politically cultural, but also victimizer, neo-Marxist kind of politics is a form of art criticism, they have a tendency to try to make everything, to a hammer, everything's a nail. So they say things like, well, isn't all art political? And isn't all horror political? Everything is all political all the time. It's like, God, no. But I said to people, I'd say, no, actually, all horror and all art isn't political, but all politics is horror. that I will give you. But I think that I don't know, if you really want, you can make anything be about anything. That's why conspiracy theories are possible. But for me, the thing that I always come back to is, what the hell is Psycho about but a wrong turn? Psycho's just a wrong turn. I think about that all the time, how that movie starts out about something that it completely switches gears. And I have to be honest, I was watching the sequel to Psycho because I was hearing some really good things about it, and I thought, I really ought to watch that just to see what it is. A sequel to Psycho. And man, does Anthony Perkins just do an amazing job in that film. And to me, it is a very worthy sequel. It's a heartbreaking character study. You actually get to know Norman Bates in that movie, and it's just a heartbreaking character study. There were moments in that movie where I got really choked up for that character, and that's saying something, because Norman Bates is a murderer. But it's part of the genius of Anthony Perkins as an actor, and the team that made that sequel. There we go. So yeah, one of the things that sort of is inspiring to me with this character, and that inspired me with this character, I should say, was an effect and a reference to world theater that Julie Taymor used in the Lion King musical, where there's a lot of theatrical productions where they use ideas like having ribbons being pulled out of a mask by the eyes to kind of be symbolic of tears. These are kind of not as symbolic, but it's much of, that aspect of things, but it's just to give it a little bit more of a creepy feel, to have these mummy wraps dragging off from it. There you go. Go team. Yeah, I think everybody probably always feels that their chat, they've got the best chat, but, I'll throw my hat in there and say I've got a pretty darn good chat. You guys, yeah, good job tracking that down. I may have known that at some point, but I got to be honest with you, that was not on my hard drive, and it doesn't shock me. What a genius! I mean, when I'm doing my artwork, I am essentially, my basis of understanding storytelling and so many things that I respect and admire is built on a foundation. One could even say, I am sitting on a foundation of Twilight Zone. I'm just reaching underneath my chair right now, and I actually have the complete Twilight Zone Blu-ray under my seat. So both literally and figuratively, got Twilight Zone. Gets me where I live. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's the goal. I nuked the face of this character right here today to make it look more like the sketch. And there's a link to my Instagram in the description for anybody who hasn't been there. But you can actually see what this started out today as. And what happened was I did a quick doodle of it, and it was a perfect sum up of what this character was supposed to be. And then I, utterly, changed it as I started the rendering process, and it lost this quality of these wider, almost wing-like lats that are kind of coming into the side of the character's anatomy with this dark core shadow running through it. And then the core idea of the way that the vampire was depicted in NOSFERO was the idea of this fear of infectious diseases and the vampire plague and all of this kind of thing, which was, tied to, what was kind of going on culturally, although I don't know how much of it is tied to it. The thing, because everything is so politicized when we do film criticism, but the aesthetic of NOSFERO is that of a rat. And I thought, if I'm going to do this kind of ultimate vampire, character, then I want to make sure that I am approaching it and treating it a little bit more like it's a bat. And it's funny enough, I was just looking over at my NOSFERO figure, and that dadgum figure always... I love the figure more than anything, but I have to tell you, Mezco, folks over at Mezco, I love you. Thank you for the blade figure that I could replace the head on so that it looks like Wesley Snipes. But the ankle on my NOSFERO figure falls apart. But this is one of the greatest bits of reference I've ever owned. This is the NOSFERO figure from Mezco. And if you look at the face on it, and it's a little bit of an inspired by kind of thing. Let's see if we can get some more light coming in two directions. There we go. If you look at the face on it, you can really see the rat-like quality to the character. And I thought, if I'm going to do a NOSFERO-inspired character... Well, actually, I probably should have been using both of those lights from the beginning. It's a little bit easier to see what I'm doing here. But if you look at, what I'm doing with this character, it's almost like a rat king, a god, rat king, not Hitchcock, what am I saying? Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, Cthulhu, mythos, beast. But I also I didn't want it to seem too intelligent. So we always complain about how difficult it is to go from sketch to clean lines and shading. We always seem to lose some essence. Yes, yeah. I think that's part of it. And I think, although I think that the biggest thing that I've been thinking a lot about as a parent is that, everything always seems like it's perfect before, quote unquote, before it's done anything. Like a lot of parents get married to the idea of the concept that they have for their kids. And then when your kids are growing up, if you have that kind of attitude, like, oh, you've got to be this, oh, you've got to be like this, other than being, hopefully a responsible, person and kind person. And I've never sort of like thought about it in those terms, because everything before it's done anything, you could argue is perfect, or you could argue hasn't done anything yet. And so one of the things that, this may seem like a weird tangent, but one of the it's something I have to think about a lot. One of the things that drives me crazy at art school is when the only advice that teachers would give back when I was a teacher was make it more like the sketch. And I'd always say a sketch is like a newborn baby. It's all potential, and you can kind of see it could go great places, but it could also go other places. And you kind of have to sort of say to yourself, there's the kind of the evolution of the drawing, and it's got to be able to go in, and of people, got to be able to go in different directions and try things. And so I guess the best way I would word it is this Ian McCaig quote that I'm sure I said when I had you as a student, Edmund, was when someone asked him, how do you know when a sketch is done or when a concept design is done? And he goes, right, when I screw it up, like right when I mess it up, because that's when I know exactly when I should have stopped, is after I've gone too far. But you can't get to those great places on the other side of it, of pushing it too far, if you don't try, and if you just kind of keep everything sort of insulated. And so I was able to, because I photograph my process and I keep it on Instagram, I was able to kind of go back and bring this back. And if you look at the face that I had for this character before today, you will see I obliterated this entire center area, just gone. Like, it was a completely different face when I started it this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. And that's really important. Is I try not to ever work in a way to where I'm get too precious about, there's what the when it comes to comics and things like that, I want it to be right for I don't want to say right for the story and all that stuff, because I feel like those are more, with respect, those are more filmmakery terms. It's right for the aesthetic, because with comics and with the work I'm doing, what I would say is that when you open up a comic book page, there's both a story moment to it, but there's also an aesthetic moment to it. And so when you see a double page spread, or you see something like this, there's so many things at play, like on the cover to book one, there's so many things that are at play that I can't just say, oh, it's story. Like, what's the story? What's the meaning of this? It's like a moment. It's like a frozen moment. You can see the pigment. You can see how things are moving around. There's not a lot of depth of field. It's almost, graphic. That's just pure aesthetic, magic. I don't know. You work on the skills until you can get to that point where it happens sort of accidentally. And it's the same thing when I'm painting this female figure's back, and people look at it and they go, oh, the aesthetics, how do you do that? Or how do you put a figure together? Or they go, oh, it's easy. And I'm like, paint anything aesthetic, like these fabric rhythms, and you just have to, or ribbons coming off of here from the mummy, and the rhythms of how it comes together are so tricky. And there's a part of it where your thought process just has to become physical. Like you turn off your brain and you just kind of physically try to execute it. So that's pretty much been, what the goal has been on this spread. And this is kind of the last, it's kind of, I don't know, I want to say it's bittersweet, but these are the last little images I'm doing before I go and I cut the trailer. Under here I have this page that I've been working on for a bit that's more or less like it's in the final sort of stages of being completed. And, it's been a long time getting to the point with this character, and a lot of work to really get into the mind of this character, and get into the mind of this, the story of this book and this grimoire, and what it unlocks, and his meeting with this character. And, you just look at these pages, or at least for me, I just look at these pages and I just sort of go like, wow, this is really happening. I'm seeing the story come together. I'm seeing the figures, and I'm seeing how this whole world I'm creating comes together. And I just did a little polish on the lettering for the NOSFERO cover. And, you know, it's like the lettering is really starting to finally sparkle with a little wash of yellow, little wash of blue, and some really serious fine line, no templates, all hand done, you know, work. And it's the same thing. I'm going to give a sneak peek because I'm not posting it online, and hopefully Ethan won't get mad, but I've kind of kept this I've kept this under wraps forever, and I held it up on his stream the other night, so I'm just going to do a quick under wraps thing. But this is a piece that I was working on recently, and yeah, I got a lot of cool, fun, interesting stuff going on right now. And so, yeah, just stick around and check this stuff out. Make sure to like and subscribe. And thank you to everybody who has been checking out this work, and everybody who's been supportive of the project and of all of my art books in the past. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that. Everybody check out The Choice Voice. Much love, everybody, for liking and subscribing. And I will talk to all of you guys soon. Thank you so much. And there'll be much more cool artwork to see. So like and subscribe. Take care, everybody. And hope you enjoyed the stream. There'll be more coming fast and furious soon, I promise. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Kick off! Ain't got nothing on